The alarm blared in Lieutenant Jack Forrester's cockpit like a furious hornet trapped inside a tin can. Sparks spat from the console as warning lights flared crimson, bathing the cramped interior in a chaotic glow. Smoke curled from a vent near his feet, and Jack's fingers danced across the control panel, muttering curses that would have made a pirate blush. "Oh no, oh no, oh no!" He gritted through his teeth, slapping buttons like they owed him money. "Come on, baby, don't fall apart on me now!" His ship, the Pathfinder, was an old Federation scout vessel, a sturdy little thing that had seen one too many patch jobs. It wasn't supposed to be in this sector, but Jack had taken a shortcut. The Federation warned all pilots to avoid this region of space, a volatile zone swarming with ruthless alien warlords. But Jack, being Jack, had calculated that if he shaved a few light years off his route, he'd be back at base with just enough time to hit the cantina before happy hour ended. "Great plan, Jack," he muttered to himself. "Absolutely brilliant." The Pathfinder lurched again, bucking like a mechanical bull. The main thruster stuttered, and a shrill alert rang in his ears, thruster failure imminent. "Yeah, I figured." Jack barked back at the ship as if it could hear him. The comms crackled. A garbled voice, alien, guttural, spat something in a language Jack didn't recognize. The signal was faint, but the tone was unmistakable, hostile. Jack squinted through the viewport and saw them, sleek, spiked warships closing in fast. Their jagged hulls bristled with weapons, and their formation suggested they weren't here to ask for directions. "Oh, fantastic," Jack muttered. He flicked open the emergency channel. "This is Lieutenant Jack Forrester of the United Earth Federation. If anyone's listening, I'm being tailed by some rather unpleasant individuals, and I'd really appreciate." A blast rocked his ship before he could finish. The Pathfinder spun wildly, alarms shrieking louder. Jack clutched the controls, barely managing to stabilize the ship before it spiraled into a nearby asteroid field. He knew it was over. His engines were gone, and those warships were closing fast. With no choice left, he hit the distress beacon and opened his comms one last time. "This is Lieutenant Jack Forrester," he said, voice grim but calm. "If anyone's hearing this, well, I guess I'm screwed. But you should know." His tone shifted to something almost mischievous. "These guys chasing me? They're about to regret it. Big time." Moments later, his ship shuddered and went dark. The warships surrounded him like vultures circling a carcass. Jack came to with a splitting headache and an unpleasant sense of déjà vu. The air was cold, metallic, and stale. He blinked through the haze and found himself strapped to a chair inside what looked like a Galactic interrogation cell. "Fantastic," he muttered. A shadow loomed over him. General Tharic, a towering Galactic warrior clad in black armor, stared down with reptilian eyes. His scaly face was twisted into a sneer, and his jagged teeth gleamed like broken glass. "You are the Earth Scout?" Tharic's voice was like gravel sliding down metal. "Scout? No, no, no," Jack said innocently. "I'm just a traveling salesman. Thought I'd swing by and sell you guys some scented candles?" Tharic's eyes narrowed. "You mock me?" "No, no," Jack chuckled. "I'd never do that. I'm sure you're a wonderful person when you're not kidnapping strangers." Tharic's fist slammed against the table, denting the metal. Jack winced. "Okay, maybe sarcasm wasn't the best strategy. You will tell me what that transmission meant," Tharic growled. "The one you sent before we captured you. What is this plan you spoke of?" Jack grinned. "Oh, that? Just a little bluff. Thought I'd spice things up before you guys hauled me off." Tharic's eyes flickered with suspicion. "I do not believe you." "You probably shouldn't," Jack admitted. "I lie all the time." The general's glare hardened. "You will tell me the truth, or you will suffer." "Oh, I'm sure I will," Jack said. "But before we get to the torture part, can I at least get a drink? I mean, come on, what kind of lousy host doesn't offer refreshments?" Tharic's patience snapped. He grabbed Jack's collar and yanked him forward until their faces were inches apart. "You think this is funny?" Tharic snarled. Kind of, Jack said, flashing a crooked grin. But that's probably just my coping mechanism kicking in. Tharic's growl vibrated through Jack's chest. The warlord barked an order, and 2 guards dragged Jack away. They shoved him into a cold, dim cell with metal walls lined with deep scratches, like past prisoners had tried clawing their way out. Jack exhaled and slumped against the wall. His fingers reached instinctively to the small device tucked inside his sleeve, a barely functional emergency transmitter. The Gorlax had crushed his main comms, but they hadn't found this. He flicked it on and whispered into it. If anyone's still listening, tell Mira I made contact. They're buying it. I've got them thinking Earth's hiding some superweapon, Nova Beacon or something. No idea what that is, but they seem to think it's scary enough to delay their plans. He paused, glancing toward the cell door. Tell her she better get here fast, or these guys are going to realize I'm full of crap. Jack smirked, then leaned back against the wall. Hours later, Tharic stood in the command room, scowling at a screen displaying the garbled remains of Jack's last transmission. The Gorlac communications officer played it again. These guys chasing me, about to regret it, big time. Tharic's fist tightened. He's hiding something. Prepare the war fleet. Are we certain this Nova Beacon exists? One of Tharic's officers asked. I don't know, Tharic growled. But I won't risk it. As the fleet's engines roared to life, Tharic stared at the screen, his expression murderous. Find out what he knows, Tharic muttered. Even if I have to tear it from his mind. Meanwhile, in his cell, Jack stretched out on the cold floor, using his jacket as a pillow. Yup, he muttered to himself. This is definitely worse than happy hour. Captain Mira stared at the flickering screen in front of her, replaying the broken transmission for the 3rd time. Jack's voice crackled through the static, distorted yet unmistakably familiar. His tone had been light-hearted, far too casual for a man staring death in the face, but Mira knew Jack better than most. Beneath his sarcasm was a hint of urgency, a barely contained desperation. The last words lingered in her mind, gnawing at her like a splinter. These guys are about to regret it, big time. She knew Jack wasn't bluffing. He had done something reckless, no doubt, but if he was stalling the Gorlax, it meant they had already taken him alive. That was both good news and bad news. Good because Jack still had time. Bad because the Gorlax weren't exactly known for their hospitality. Mira tapped a series of coordinates into her navigation console. Jack's transmission contained barely recognizable data packets buried beneath his words, a set of location markers cleverly disguised as transmission static. It was risky, but Mira knew Jack was resourceful enough to leave a clue like that. He always was clever with tech, when he wasn't busy getting himself into trouble. Her ship, the Valor's Edge, was already moving at maximum speed. The Gorlac-controlled sector wasn't far, but getting in without drawing attention would be tricky. Mira knew the Gorlacs wouldn't hesitate to shoot down any approaching vessel. They were warlords, paranoid, aggressive, and always looking for an excuse to start a fight. Mira wasn't about to give them one. Not until she had Jack back. Inside the Gorlac command center, General Tharic paced like a caged beast. His officers stood in silence, watching their warlord grow increasingly agitated. The fractured message from Jack had played on loop for hours. Tharic's patience had worn thin. He's lying, Tharic growled. Earth doesn't possess anything called a Nova Beacon. One of his officers shifted uneasily. But if they do... They don't, Tharic snapped. This human is bluffing. And yet, the officer pressed. If this bluff is a trap, if they've developed some superweapon and we attack Earth without caution, we cannot afford to look weak. Tharic snarled, slamming his fist onto the table. If the Federation thinks we hesitate, they will exploit that weakness. We march forward. General, the comms officer interrupted. Our scouts report an unknown ship entering the sector. Federation markings. Tharic's eyes narrowed. Send a patrol. I want them intercepted. Mira's ship glided carefully along the asteroid belt that rimmed the sector. The dense debris field was dangerous, but it made her less visible to long-range Gorlak scanners. As she maneuvered through the maze of rock and ice, her comms crackled. "Approaching patrol vessels," her navigator warned. "Damn it," Mira muttered. She adjusted the course, pulling the ship deeper into the asteroid belt. The hull groaned under the stress, but the patrol ships couldn't pursue her without risking collision. "Hang in there, Jack," Mira whispered. Meanwhile, Jack lay sprawled on the cold floor of his cell. His ribs ached from the last round of questioning, if being repeatedly punched in the stomach could even be called that. His face was swollen, one eye barely able to open. Tharic's guards weren't known for their finesse. Still, Jack wasn't about to give up. He had been playing a dangerous game, feeding Tharic just enough nonsense to keep the Warlords second-guessing. Jack figured he could buy enough time for Mira to arrive, assuming she even got his message. The cell door groaned open, and Pax, his fellow prisoner, slipped inside. Pax was a wiry creature from a species Jack didn't recognize, all sinewy limbs and bulbous black eyes. Jack had trusted him, or at least thought he could, but now Pax wore a sly grin that told Jack otherwise. "You've got about 10 minutes, Pax whispered. 10 minutes before what?" Jack groaned. "Before Tharic decides you're no longer amusing." Pax leaned closer. "You made a mistake, human. You think you're clever, but Tharic isn't as dumb as you think. He knows you're stalling." Jack chuckled weakly. "Yeah, well, that's the problem with making things up. Eventually, people stop believing you." "You told him Earth had a Nova beacon," Pax sneered. "That's what's keeping you alive." "I know," Jack muttered, wincing as he tried to sit up. "That's the idea." Pax's grin widened. "He's moving his fleet toward Earth, just in case. By the time your people figure it out, it'll be too late." Jack's blood ran cold. He had expected Tharic to hesitate, not to mobilize an entire fleet. Jack clenched his fists. He had to act fast. "I'm guessing you're here to turn me in?" Jack asked. "Get on Tharic's good side." "Oh no," Pax smirked. "I'm here to make sure you're dead before Mira arrives." Jack lunged, throwing his weight at Pax. The alien was faster, dodging aside with ease. Pax twisted Jack's arm behind his back and slammed him face first into the wall. "Nice try," Pax whispered in Jack's ear. "But Tharic's fleet leaves in 1 hour, and when they wipe out your precious Earth, I'll be laughing from the other side of the galaxy." With one last shove, Pax left the cell, locking the door behind him. Jack coughed, tasting blood in his mouth. His ribs throbbed, and his vision swam, but he forced himself to sit up. His fingers found the emergency transmitter still tucked inside his sleeve. "Come on, Mira," he whispered. "Please tell me you're close." Outside, Mira's strike team had landed undetected on the Gorlak moon's surface. Dressed in stolen Gorlak armor, they slipped through the dim corridors of the fortress, moving swiftly toward the prison cells. Mira's heart pounded in her chest. She knew time was running out. Jack's cell was just ahead when a patrol of guards rounded the corner. The two sides froze, then chaos erupted. Mira's team opened fire, blasters lighting up the corridor. The guards fell quickly, but the noise had drawn attention. "We need to move," Mira barked. They reached Jack's cell just as alarms began to wail throughout the fortress. Jack's battered face lit up when he saw Mira. "About time," Jack grunted. "I was starting to think you'd miss the party." Mira smirked. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." We may want to leave now," Jack added, wincing as he climbed to his feet. As they sprinted back through the corridors, Tharic's voice thundered over the fortress speakers. "The Earth Scout is escaping! Kill them all!" The fortress erupted in chaos as Gorlak soldiers poured from every corridor. Mira's team fought fiercely, blasting through wave after wave of enemies. Jack stumbled along beside Mira, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. They reached the extraction point just as Tharic himself appeared at the end of the corridor. The Warlord's face twisted with fury as he raised his weapon, but Jack grinned. "Catch you later, Scales for Brains," Jack called out. The ship's ramp closed just as the first shot hit. The Valor's Edge shot into the sky, engines flaring as they raced away from the Gorlak fleet. "You know," Jack muttered, slumping into a seat, "I think I might be too good at bluffing." Mira chuckled grimly. "Let's just hope Earth's ready when Theric shows up." Jack closed his eyes, feeling the pain in his ribs finally catch up with him. "Yeah," he muttered. "Me too." The Valor's Edge soared through the void of space, its engines straining as Mira pushed the ship to its limits. The Gorlak fleet had begun to mobilize, and it wouldn't be long before Theric's warships closed in. Jack sat slumped in a chair, clutching his ribs with a grimace. Every breath felt like a knife twisting inside his chest, but the dull pain barely registered against the weight in his mind. He had lied, bluffed, and danced his way out of plenty of bad situations before, but this time felt different. Theric wasn't just angry, he was convinced. The Warlord truly believed Earth had a powerful new superweapon. Jack had expected Theric to hesitate, maybe retreat long enough for Federation forces to regroup. Instead, Jack's fly had set Theric's fleet on the warpath. The Nova Beacon, a weapon that didn't even exist, was about to start a war. Mira paced back and forth across the command deck, her face twisted in frustration. She knew Jack's bluff had kept him alive, but now Earth was at risk. If Theric launched a full-scale assault, Federation forces wouldn't be able to stop him in time. Jack watched her silently, wincing as he shifted in his seat. "You're blaming yourself," Jack muttered. Mira shot him a sharp look. "Of course I'm blaming myself," she snapped. "I should have figured out what you were up to sooner. I could have intercepted the fleet before things escalated." Jack let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah? Well, I'm the idiot who told a homicidal lizard warlord that Earth's got a magic death ray. I think I win this round of bad decisions." Mira's expression softened slightly, but only for a moment. "We need to stop him," she said. "We can't outrun Theric's fleet for long." Jack rubbed his face, exhaustion pulling at him. "We won't need to outrun them," he said. "We just need to give them something to chase." Mira frowned. "What are you suggesting?" Jack leaned forward, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "I told Theric about the Nova Beacon. He thinks it's real. So what if we make him think he's about to find it?" Mira stared at him in disbelief. "You want to bait Theric's entire fleet?" "It's our best shot," Jack said. "We transmit coordinates to a random asteroid field, something dense enough that they'll have to waste hours searching for a weapon that doesn't exist. Meanwhile, we warn Earth and scramble the fleet." "That's insane," Mira muttered. "Yeah," Jack said with a faint smile. "But it's got just enough chaos to work." Mira stared at him for a long moment, then sighed and turned to her crew. "Transmit those coordinates," she ordered. "And send a warning to Earth. Full priority signal, they need to know what's coming." Moments later, the Valor's Edge broadcasted Jack's fake signal, coordinates buried in a disguised military transmission, coded to look like highly sensitive Federation intelligence. Jack leaned back, hoping Theric's arrogance would do the rest. Inside Theric's command chamber, the Warlord's scaly face twisted into a grim smile as the intercepted message reached him. The Nova Beacon's supposed coordinates flickered across his screen. His officers murmured with excitement, some whispering about the power Earth's mysterious new weapon must hold. Theric silenced them with a sharp growl. "Their attempt to hide it only confirms its power," Theric sneered. "Prepare the fleet. We go to those coordinates, and when the Nova Beacon is ours, Earth will fall." The Gorlak fleet veered off course, following Jack's false lead. Theric's warships moved in coordinated formation, engines glowing like molten fire as they plunged into the asteroid field. The ships fired probing lasers and deployed sensor drones, scouring the rocky expanse in search of the mythical superweapon. Hours passed, but nothing appeared. The Gorlak fleet pressed deeper into the field, weaving between jagged debris while frustration simmered on Theric's face. On board the Valor's Edge, Jack watched the fleet's progress on the monitor. Theric's ships were deep inside the asteroid field, too committed to retreat easily. "We've got them stuck," Mira said quietly. "But this won't hold them for long." Jack's brow furrowed. I know, he said. That's why I'm going back. Mira turned sharply. Absolutely not. You don't have a choice, Jack said. They're looking for a Nova beacon. So I'm going to give them one. Mira's face hardened. You've already been beaten half to death once. You're not walking into Tharic's hands again. I won't have to, Jack said. I just need to get their attention. He tapped the console. I'll slip into one of the wrecked asteroid stations, rig a fake power signature, and light it up like a star going nova. Tharic will think he's found the weapon. That's suicide, Mira said. You'll never make it back in time. Jack shrugged. Then you'd better have the ship ready to pick me up fast. Despite her protests, Mira knew there was no time for alternatives. Jack suited up and climbed into a small shuttle, gripping the controls with sweaty fingers. His battered body screamed in protest, but he ignored the pain. The asteroid station loomed ahead, a crumbling ruin from some forgotten war. Jack slipped the shuttle inside, dodging debris and twisted metal. The control room barely functioned, but Jack's fingers worked the console like magic, bypassing ancient systems and creating a massive energy pulse that flickered to life on the Galactic fleet's scanners. Back aboard Tharic's ship, the Warlord's eyes gleamed as the signal appeared. The Nova beacon, he growled. Prepare to deploy boarding parties. We take it alive. Jack gritted his teeth, watching the Galactic ship's shift formation. He activated the countdown on his improvised device, a volatile reactor core that would detonate if tampered with. He grinned to himself. If Tharic wanted a Nova beacon, he was about to get one, just not the way he expected. The Valor's Edge swooped in, Mira piloting low and fast through the debris field. Jack sprinted through the station's corridor, his breath ragged and ribs screaming in protest. He reached the shuttle just as the first Galactic soldiers breached the station's outer hull. Go! Jack shouted through his calm. The Valor's Edge raced away, Jack barely strapped into his seat before the asteroid station erupted in a brilliant wave of fire and light. The Galactic soldiers still inside never had a chance. Tharic's flagship reeled from the shockwave, alarms howling as debris tore across its hull. Tharic bellowed with rage, watching the false beacon, and half his fleet, vanish in a blaze of destruction. The Valor's Edge soared toward safer space. Jack exhaled, his battered body finally giving in to exhaustion. Mira sat beside him, shaking her head. You're insane, she said. Completely insane. Jack grinned weakly. Yeah, he muttered. But at least I'm alive. Mira's smile faded slightly. Tharic's still out there, she said. He's going to want revenge. Good, Jack muttered, closing his eyes. I'll have time to come up with a better lie by then. Jack awoke to the sound of distant murmuring voices and the rhythmic hum of the Valor's Edge's engines. His ribs ached, his head throbbed, and his muscles felt like they had been tied in knots. For a moment, he considered closing his eyes again and letting the pain carry him back into unconsciousness. But the memory of Tharic's fleet, the burning wreckage of the asteroid station, and the knowledge that Earth was still in danger jolted him upright. Mira stood at the console, her expression grim. She barely glanced his way when she heard him stir. Jack pushed himself out of the medical cot with a wince and staggered over. Tell me you've got good news, Jack muttered, his voice rough. Mira didn't answer right away. She tapped a few keys, pulling up a star chart with a series of glowing red markers. The Galactic fleet had regrouped faster than expected. Tharic's forces were already repositioning, and their course pointed directly toward Earth. Jack stared at the map in disbelief. They're still coming? Jack asked, his voice incredulous. I blew up half their ships. Not enough, Mira said tightly. Tharic's convinced we still have the Nova beacon. He's furious, Jack. The destruction of that station didn't scare him off. It convinced him the weapon is real, and now he's more determined than ever. Jack rubbed his face and groaned. Unbelievable. I make up a fake superweapon, and now the entire planet's about to get flattened because some oversized lizard has an ego problem. Mira crossed her arms. We can still warn the Federation. Earth's fleet is mobilizing, and if we hit Theric before he reaches orbit, we might be able to stop him. Jack's laugh was dry and bitter. Yeah, might isn't exactly comforting. Then come up with something better. Mira shot back. Jack paced the room, mind racing. There had to be a way to throw Theric off, to break his focus. He thought back to Theric's expression in the interrogation room, that arrogant snarl, the way his eyes had gleamed when Jack bluffed about the Nova beacon. Theric wasn't just looking for a weapon. He was looking for dominance. Jack knew how Theric thought now. The Warlord wasn't afraid of a fair fight. He thrived on brutality. The only thing that rattled him was uncertainty, the feeling that something might be lurking just out of sight. We need to fake him out again, Jack said suddenly. Mira frowned. Jack, you barely made it out of the last one. We don't have another asteroid station to blow up. We don't need one, Jack said. We just need him to think there's something bigger than him waiting on Earth. Mira stared at him. You're seriously suggesting another bluff? Not just a bluff, Jack said. We're going to make Theric think the Nova beacon is already active and Earth is ready to fire it. Mira exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples. That's insane. I know, Jack said. That's why it'll work. Hours later, the Valor's Edge transmitted a broadcast on an open frequency, one the Galactic fleet was guaranteed to intercept. Jack stood before the camera, dressed in a Federation uniform that Mira had reluctantly dug out of storage. He adjusted his collar, wincing as his ribs reminded him they were still damaged. This is Lieutenant Jack Forrester of the United Earth Federation, Jack began, his voice firm and authoritative. We are aware of the Galactic fleet's movements and their attempt to obtain Earth's defensive system, designated Nova Beacon. Be warned, the Nova Beacon has been activated. Any hostile action toward Earth will be met with catastrophic force. Your ships will be destroyed before they even break orbit. This is your final warning. Mira cut the transmission. The silence that followed felt like a weight pressing down on the room. That's it? Mira asked. Just a threat? Jack forced a grin. Sometimes all you need to win a fight is to convince the other guy you've already won. Out in deep space, aboard the Galactic flagship, Theric's eyes narrowed as the transmission played. He stood motionless, watching Jack's face on the screen. His officers whispered uneasily behind him, and for a moment, the Warlord said nothing. Finally, he turned to his second-in-command, a broad-shouldered brute named Gore. If they had a weapon that powerful, Theric said slowly, why didn't they use it when we entered their sector? Gore shifted uneasily. Perhaps they wanted to lure us closer. Or, Theric muttered, perhaps the scout has fooled us again. General, another officer said, stepping forward. Scanners show no evidence of a planetary weapon on Earth. There's no energy buildup consistent with a device like the one they described. Theric's scowl deepened. This human, he's playing games. And if he isn't? Gore asked. If we attack Earth and they obliterate the fleet? Theric's snarl twisted into something colder. We test them. Send a cruiser ahead, one ship, no escorts. Let them see it approach. If this Nova beacon exists, they'll fire it. If not, he let the unfinished threat hang in the air. On Earth, Federation Command scrambled to respond. Mira's warning had reached them just in time, and their orbital defense systems were operating at full capacity. The incoming Galactic cruiser approached like a shark cutting through black water, slow, deliberate, testing the air for weakness. Federation forces prepared to fire, but Mira knew the truth. They weren't prepared to fight the full fleet. If Theric believed the Nova beacon was a bluff, Earth wouldn't survive. Jack watched the cruiser creep closer, his fingers tightening into fists. He hated being helpless, hated that so much depended on a lie. He turned to Mira. If they figure it out. Jack's voice trailed off. They won't, Mira said more firmly than she felt. The Galactic cruiser passed the outer perimeter of Earth's defense grid. For several agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, just as Jack felt his breath catch in his throat, the Federation's defense platforms erupted with fire. Dozens of beams lashed out, slicing through the Gorlak cruiser like a knife through paper. The vessel erupted in a bright flash, scattering debris across the sky. On Tharik's bridge, the Warlord's expression hardened as his officers stared in shock. No one spoke. No one moved. Tharik's gaze lingered on the wreckage flickering across the screen. "We retreat," Tharik growled at last. "For now." The Gorlak fleet turned away, engines burning as they vanished into the black void. Jack watched their departure from the Valor's edge and let out a long, shaky breath. "You did it," Mira said quietly. "No," Jack muttered. "We all did." Back at Federation Command, Jack was hailed as a hero. His quick thinking had saved Earth, and despite Mira's teasing about his endless streak of reckless decisions, she knew the truth. Jack's instincts had been exactly what they needed. As the crowd of officers, soldiers, and officials cheered for him, Jack leaned closer to Mira. "You know," Jack whispered, "next time, maybe I'll just file a proper report and stay out of trouble." Mira chuckled. "Yeah, sure," she said. "That sounds exactly like you." For a moment, Jack allowed himself to believe the danger was over, that Tharik would slink back to whatever dark corner of the galaxy he came from. But somewhere deep down, he knew the Warlord wasn't done with him yet. The weeks that followed were anything but restful. Earth had narrowly avoided destruction, but the aftermath left everyone on edge. The Federation scrambled to rebuild the damaged outer defense grid, and high-ranking officials debated how to respond to Tharik's retreat. Some argued that the Gorlak warlord had been humiliated and wouldn't return. Others insisted Tharik was simply regrouping and would strike again once the Federation's guard was down. Jack had no doubt which side was right. Despite being hailed as a hero, Jack found himself growing restless. He was tired of speeches, tired of handshakes, and most of all, tired of pretending that everything was fine. Mira could see it too. She knew Jack better than anyone, and the moment she found him brooding alone in the ship's lounge with a half-finished drink in his hand, she knew something was wrong. "You're thinking too hard," Mira said, sliding into the seat across from him. Jack stared at his glass. "I can't shake the feeling we haven't seen the last of Tharik." "You're probably right," Mira said. "But he took some serious damage. It'll be a long time before he's strong enough to try something again." Jack shook his head. "He's not going to wait. Tharik's not the type to lick his wounds and play it safe. He's the kind of guy who'll burn down half the galaxy just to prove a point." Mira leaned back in her chair. "So what do you suggest? We track him down and finish the job ourselves?" "Not exactly," Jack muttered. "But we need to figure out what he's planning before he strikes." Mira studied him for a long moment. "You already have something in mind." "I might," Jack said, lowering his voice. "Remember Pax? The rat who tried to sell me out to Tharik?" Mira's eyes narrowed. "Don't tell me you're planning to talk to him." "I don't have a choice," Jack said. "Pax knows Tharik's contacts, smugglers, mercenaries, maybe even some inside men in the Federation. If anyone knows what Tharik's up to, it's him. That's assuming Pax doesn't try to knife you the second he sees you," Mira said. "Yeah," Jack sighed. "That's a distinct possibility." Tracking down Pax wasn't easy. After his betrayal, the weaselly alien had fled Federation space and vanished into the Outer Rim, a lawless stretch of star systems where smugglers, pirates, and war criminals thrived. Mira was able to track Pax's last known location, a seedy outpost called Driftport Station, a place where trouble always seemed to find those who weren't looking for it. Jack, of course, was actively seeking trouble. The station was a sprawling mess of rusted metal walkways, flickering lights, and the unmistakable stench of grease and smoke. The air buzzed with voices, merchants haggling, gamblers shouting, and the occasional burst of violence that no one seemed particularly bothered by. Jack kept his head down, adjusting his jacket to conceal the small blaster holstered at his hip. Mira walked beside him, her hand resting casually on her own concealed weapon. Neither spoke, but both knew the tension in the air was building. They found Pax exactly where Jack expected, tucked away in the corner of a grimy bar, nervously counting a stack of credits as if he expected someone to grab them at any moment. Jack approached the table slowly, letting Pax notice him before speaking. "Miss me?" Jack asked with a crooked smile. Pax's eyes widened in panic. He tried to bolt, but Mira grabbed his arm and slammed him back into his seat. "Easy there," Jack said. "We're just here to talk." "I don't know anything," Pax blurted, his voice shaking. "Whatever you think I did, it's not true." "Oh, you definitely did it," Jack said. "But I'm not here about that. I'm here about Theric." Pax froze, eyes flicking between Jack and Mira. "I haven't seen Theric since he left me to die on that station," Pax stammered. "He thinks I'm dead. If he knew I was alive, he'd skin me." "Then you've got nothing to lose," Mira said coldly. "Start talking." Pax swallowed hard. "Look, I heard rumors, okay? Theric's been quiet since the asteroid station incident, but he's not done. Word is, he's gathering mercenaries, hit squads, not just Gorlac soldiers. He's putting together an army of cutthroats and war criminals. People who don't ask questions." Jack's stomach tightened. "Where?" "I don't know exactly," Pax said quickly. "But I heard something about a station called Gore Spire. Black Market Hub. No one goes there unless they want to disappear." Jack glanced at Mira. "Sounds like a good place to start." Pax shifted uneasily. "If you're smart, you won't go there at all." Jack smirked. "I've never been accused of that before." Gore Spire was worse than Jack had imagined. Suspended in the remains of a shattered moon, the station was a twisted maze of corridors, rusted hulls, and flickering lights. The air smelled like oil and smoke, and the people walking the streets were exactly the sort who wouldn't hesitate to stab someone over a bad drink. Jack and Mira moved carefully, blending into the crowds as best they could. They found what they were looking for in a shadowy market tucked beneath the station's lower decks, a Gorlac officer speaking quietly with a mercenary leader. Jack recognized the insignia on the Gorlac's armor, one of Theric's lieutenants. Whatever they were planning, it was happening soon. Mira shifted beside him. "We need to get closer." Before Jack could respond, the Gorlac officer's eyes flicked their way. Jack didn't know how, but they'd been made. The officer barked something in Gorlac, and 3 mercenaries drew weapons and charged. Jack and Mira bolted down the alleyway, weaving between market stalls as blaster fire exploded behind them. A crate burst apart just inches from Jack's head, and Mira returned fire as they sprinted toward the nearest exit. The mercenaries were fast, but Jack knew the station better. He led Mira down a narrow passage, ducking through a hidden maintenance hatch just as their pursuers stormed past. They emerged into a grimy storage bay, hearts pounding. Mira leaned against the wall, catching her breath. "That could have gone better," she muttered. "Yeah," Jack agreed. "But at least now we know Theric's gearing up for something big." They returned to the Valor's Edge and contacted Federation Command. Intelligence analysts confirmed Pax's warning. Theric's forces were growing, and reports indicated he was targeting an outlying Federation colony near the rim. Jack knew what that meant. Theric wasn't coming for Earth yet. He was testing the waters, hitting weaker targets first before launching a full-scale assault. Mira stood at the helm, eyes fixed on the star map as she traced Theric's predicted path. "We'll get there first," she said firmly. "We won't let him destroy that colony." Jack nodded, but he knew it wouldn't be that simple. Theric was smart, ruthless, but smart. If they were going to stop him, they'd need more than courage and quick thinking. They'd need to outplay him on his own terms. As the Valor's Edge jumped into hyperspace, Jack stared out the viewport at the endless void beyond. The war with Theric wasn't over, it had barely begun. But this time, Jack knew exactly what he was up against. And this time, he was ready.